Championship weekend is upon us. We are down to 4 teams fighting their way into the Super Bowl here in a couple weeks in New Orleans. I'm Kelly Stewart at Kelly in Vegas, and this is Bet On It. Every single week we get here, we come in, we work our asses off just for you guys to bring you guys awesome picks. Marco D'Angelo, Joe Raineri, Teddy Covers. You guys were so close to the finish line. I can almost taste the vacation. All jokes aside, we're going to break down the AFC Championship game. We're going to talk to Vegas runner, Greek gambler, Ace, the man of many names. We're going to talk to Andy Lang about some prop bets. Ralph Michaels got some TNA. We're going to talk to NFC Championship game. And of course, we're going to check in with DiCesare from the WestGate Superbook. We've got lots to break down today, guys, even though we only have 2 games. So we're going to get right into it. The AFC Championship game. This one's kind of interesting. I got the odds logic screen open right now. Bills. I immediately, guys, went out and teased them. I said, Bills 1.5. Teaser. Open it up. Put some in with the Ohio State just down, to just win the game, right? -2, -2.5. And I felt pretty smart after Ohio State won. And then I had a buddy text me that was a Chiefs fan and said, you know exactly what's going to happen. I go, oh, wait, I can't wait to lose this game. The good news is if it goes to overtime, guess what happens? I can't lose my teaser bet. You can't lose the teaser bet in overtime. I am terrified to take the 2 here. Terrified. I know what happens when I bet against Patrick Mahomes, or in this case, last week you bet on Patrick Mahomes. Luckily, some people got lucky if they got in early. If you got in late, that safety. Marco D'Angelo, I'm going to go to you first. Help me make sense of this game. Playoff Patty. Are we betting against him?
Well, Kelly, first of all, go back to last week. If you bet the Kansas City-Houston game and you lost your bet, please stop betting right now, because the winning number was available no matter which side you had. You could have taken KC earlier in the week at 8.5, and you could have gotten Houston at 9.5 late on game day. So, that's why we always talk about getting the best of the number, try to anticipate which way the market's going to go and when you think you can jump in and get the best number. But now for this game, Kelly, you look at Buffalo and Kansas City. It's like we're watching the movie Groundhog Day. The same thing generally always happens. Buffalo wins during the regular season. Kansas City wins the playoff matchup. But, we still got the narrative with Kansas City that they're going to get every call. And once again, we couldn't go through a game without a questionable call. The roughing the passer or unnecessary roughness, whatever you want to do, against Houston last week. When the 2 guys actually hit one another in the head, Patrick Mahomes slid under it, and there's a penalty. I don't know exactly what the rules are for these penalties, because if that was a penalty in the Kansas City game, how the hell call the penalty when Goff got almost decapitated? I can't figure that out. But we got to take on Kansas City and the refs. And again, the Chiefs find a way. They only had 212 yards of offense last week. Now, granted, the Houston Texans do have a decent defense. I would rate Houston's defense obviously better than Buffalo's. But when you compare the offenses, there's no comparison between Houston and Buffalo with Josh Allen. I look at that game last week with KC, and the things that, really bother me, and nobody's really talking about it, but what was D'Amico Ryans thinking about, or D'Amico Ryans, I'm sorry, head coach for Houston? It's the 4th quarter. It's an 8-point game. You're just over midfield, and it's 4th and 10. And C.J. Stroud had been running for his life the entire series because they started sending blitz packages at him. He decides to go for it on 4th and 10 when he's only down 1 score and still 9 minutes to play, where he could have punted and pinned them back. Not only did they not make the first down, he gets sacked on the play for a big loss and sets up Kansas City needing just one first down, and he can kick the field goal, which, guess what? That's what they did, and that's how they got to that 11-point margin. I'm going to step in front of Kansas City here. I lean to Buffalo. I had Buffalo as a big play last week against Baltimore, and, it looked great at halftime, coming out, getting the ball to start the second half. Give Baltimore credit. They almost pulled it out, but Buffalo got the job done. whether you want to call it lucky or ugly, however you want to do it. I like it because that gets us line value the following week, and that's why we're seeing Buffalo +2. If you remember, this game opened up on the strip at a pick'em. It didn't last long, but it did open up at a pick'em, and I do respect our buddies that are at the sports books, and I think they had it right when they had it at pick. I think the value is on Buffalo.
Joe Raineri, I'd like to start off the show by congratulating you on your new head coach. I don't know if you've seen, but the Jets just hired Aaron Glenn. I feel like that's like, you should be happy.
Yeah, it's great. It's going to work out great. You know, hire the head coach before the general manager. Now you got to find a general manager that's going to be okay with the head coach. So, no, things working really well for the Jets. They do everything really by the book. It's amazing why they suck so bad there. Cal, welcome in, former New York Jet anyway. So he has been part of the Jet family as a player for many, many years. I just wish they would have kind of found that GM first because this team needs a lot of help there, Cal. But I'm already looking for that win total under, by the way, Nick. Whatever it is, Cal. Could be 4 games. I'm still going under.
He and Aaron Rodgers are going to get along great. I can see it now. Let's get into the AFC Championship game here, Joe. Josh Allen, I said he was my MVP. I still bet against him last week. Well, not really. Let's just put it this way. I didn't hedge my Ravens 10-1 ticket. In hindsight, I don't feel like it was the wrong thing to do. I could have guaranteed myself at least to break even, if you will. But sometimes when games have 3 turnovers that just don't go your way, you kind of just brush it off as a product of bad luck. What do you think about the game versus the Ravens and how it correlates to the game this week versus, the Kansas City Chiefs?
Well, it's interesting. First of all, I think this is the game that many of us thought we were going to get for a title for the AFC Championship and onto the playoffs. I'm sure the NFL is pretty excited for it as well, since this is probably the best ongoing rivalry among these front-end teams that really the league has to offer at this particular point. So, and the history tells us, Cal, that Buffalo finds a way, like Marco said, to win these games in a regular season. It's a different story in the playoffs. The Bills have won 4 consecutive regular season matchups against these teams. And now what's interesting about that, and of course the Chiefs have won all 3 playoffs. But what's interesting is that we have the same head coaches, we have the same quarterbacks, and we have pretty much a pretty consistent front office. These 2 teams, bottom line, know each other better than anybody. And if you think that history will just continue and these trends will continue, well, we saw Buffalo defeat Kansas City 30-21 at home in week 11. And for those of you that may not recall what that game was like, it was 16-14 at the half. The game was 23-21 till about 2 minutes and 27 seconds left in the game. And that's when Josh Allen closed things out with a 26-yard touchdown run on, of all things, 4th and 2. That has been the story with Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. When you consider the past 5 times these teams have gone up against one another, the games have been decided by a total of, you ready? 9, 3, 3, 6, and 4. All of those games also happen to be within 4 points heading into the 4th quarter. This is a spot at home that Kansas City has thrived in. 9-0 at home this season. They not going to impress you with how they win the games. They just win the games. I can say the same thing about Buffalo. Was there anything impressive about Buffalo last week against Baltimore that everyone went, wow, no, nothing. But what they have been impressed at, and when you dig down to the numbers, to me, there are a few statistical edges, certainly on offense, I think that favor Buffalo here. First of all, the Bills have converted almost 87% of their red zone trips for touchdowns this year. That's second in the NFL. Kansas City, by the way, 24th in the league in converting red zone trips to touchdowns. And also, is there any team that has been better this year at not beating themselves than the Buffalo Bills? They don't give up a ton of sacks, right? They lead the turnover margin in the NFL, plus 27. That is 10 more than the next highest team. They have scored a league high 138 points off of those turnovers. You know how many points they've allowed when they turned it over? 27. That was the difference last week in Baltimore. And as sure as I'm sitting here, it's going to be the issue again this week. Which one of these two offenses makes that one mistake? Mahomes earlier in the season kept throwing it to the other team. Josh Allen's got 6 interceptions all year. Both of these guys have done a great job of not turning the ball over here. It is a coin flip game and a coin flip game for a reason. But I will repeat, the last 5 times these teams have met, they have been decided by 9, 3, 3, 6, and 4. What's the teaser in this game right now, Cal? What can I get Buffalo for?
7.5.
7.5, 8 points. I just, why, if it ain't broke, why fix it, right? So you can bet Kansas City all you want. I'll take Buffalo in any teaser I can get them in across the board here this week. I don't think this is more than a field goal game.
I love to hear it. Let's hear from Teddy Covers. I always appreciate his insight. Teddy, give me your opinion on the AFC Championship game. I know Marco's broke it down. Joe's broke it down. Anything that they haven't mentioned that maybe we're missing here in this matchup?
Well, there's a couple things that I think that are worthy of mention. First, when it comes to this postseason narrative that KC Buffalo can win in the regular season, but they can't win in the postseason. The last 2 postseason meetings, one of them was Patrick Mahomes with 13 seconds left, drives him down the field. That Buffalo easily could have won that game. The other one was in overtime. All right, so there was a 3-point game last year. It's not like there's been this huge edge for KC in the postseason. They've just managed to eke out close wins. So when it talks about postseason history, recent postseason history, I don't think there's any advantage for KC in that regard. The coins flipped and it's come out heads as opposed to tails. KC's won the coin flip games. That doesn't give them an edge here. When we talk about the history of the league, all right, Kansas City is one of 4 teams in NFL history that have followed up back-to-back Super Bowl championships by getting to the conference title game. No team in the history of the league has ever won 3 straight Super Bowls. The 3 teams that won 2 straight and reached the conference championship game, that would be the 76 Pittsburgh Steelers, the 1990 San Francisco 49ers, the 1994 Dallas Cowboys. Again, old history. But it's worth noting all those 3 teams in this very spot, they all lost. And when you try to gauge hunger, how hungry a team is, as opposed to how fat and satisfied they are. We know Kansas City is searching for history, but Buffalo sure looks like a pretty hungry team. That being said, betting against Patrick Mahomes has not been a successful methodology in the postseason. This is a game, Kel, I'm still thinking about it. I have not made a bet on Buffalo, Kansas City yet. I'm not convinced that I will. But if I'm going to make a bet on the game, it's not going to be based on regular season stats don't matter. Recent series history, in my mind, is not a key factor. We're going to see if we can feel something on the nuance, because my gut says Buffalo has something to dig down deep in, but my gut also says Kansas City's a team that when you fade them in these spots, you don't do well. 16-3 in the postseason for Patrick Mahomes.
If you're new here and you have never heard of the Greek gambler because you've living under a rock, he is back, as he is every single week, to give us some of that gold. He also joins us on Saturdays and Sundays on Wager Talk Last Call. Takes us right up to, well, gonna soon be only tip-off, but usually kickoff of the NFL slate. VR, welcome in. Interesting, divisional round, we'll say. Some close calls, some blowouts, and, whether that safety was intentional or not, it definitely middled the sports books. Also, college basketball season's way underway. It's Wednesday. Normally, the show is so long, we don't have time to give out some of that college basketball gold, but you told me before the show you had a few that you wanted to share with our audience.
I do. Let's kick them out of the way real quickly so then we could dive into the NFL. Isolated some sides for you. 710 Oakland at a pick. 735 Georgia +2. 737 Texas A&M +4. 3 sides confirmed. Multiple groups, and I actually had a lean on the A&M side myself. So those are the 3 sides that I would isolate as true steam for Wednesday night's college basketball slate.
I love that, VR. Georgia on my long list. I guess I'm going to have to go ahead and fire there. I really love that basketball team, especially as underdogs this season. Let's talk about some underdogs this weekend. We only have 2 games, the AFC and the NFC Championship. Are you seeing guys play these? Are you guys seeing them teased? Are you seeing team totals, player props? What's going on for championship weekend?
Great way to set it up. Here's what we got with the Washington. Let's talk Washington, Philadelphia first. Philadelphia line moved. Obviously, wise guys bet the Philadelphia side, expecting that the public would probably come in on that side. Actually, I thought they'd come in more on the Washington side because they like betting those, put up a little to win a lot. And Washington's been doing that for them by cashing the money line. But I think this is what the Sharps looked at. Washington's coming off a game. Yes, they beat Detroit, but they had to be +5 in turnovers to get it done. Their stock is at its highest at a point where at least the box score shows they've gotten their luckiest. They got a first-year head coach. They got a rookie quarterback on the road. And you got a Philadelphia team that we already had a spread to compare to. They've already played twice. The first time in Philadelphia closed -4.5, 49. They covered that game. They were +1 in turnovers. They got the cover, and it stayed under, I believe. Second game in Washington, they went in as 4-point favorites with Kenny Pickett. Were +3 in turnovers and lost that game. It's almost never going to happen in the NFL where you're +3 in turnovers and you lose the game. So you got to chalk that up to luck once again. So you have a Washington Times team that continues to get lucky. And I think that's just, one of those automatic bets for sharps where they think a team's going to regress or progress towards the mean. Again, I wouldn't be all that short. Philadelphia, not 100% on the offensive side of the ball or on the defensive side of the ball, but I can't overlook the hypothetical. Prior to the divisional games, we had a hypothetical matchup, and they had made Philly, actually in the steam room, someone asked me, what would you make the line? And I said, probably around above a touchdown. If I think a fair line would be above a touchdown, and they brought it out 8.5 was the hypothetical. So that's another reason I think that the betting syndicates got out ahead of the public. But it would be interesting to see what the public does come Sunday. I do like the under. I'll give that to you now. I haven't bet it yet. Art DiCesare just was on Wager Talk today, and he talked about how they just moved with the market. None of their sharp bettors came in on the under, but they just followed the market. I think the sharp bettors haven't steamed that under yet because there's really no reason to. I think that's that one game where you're going to get the over money because you have 4 or 5 in this series that have gone over, but the average total is 44.8. You're looking at a 3-point adjustment off that number. Coupled with recency bias, 3 of the last 5 for both teams coming in having gone over. So I think it sets up nicely to get some value on the under. Again, I haven't fired yet, but that's the side I'm looking at. Want me to just roll right into Buffalo and Kansas City?
Actually, I have a quick question.
Please.
John Murray and I joke all the time that kicking is for losers, right? Jake Elliott missed 2 PATs, and that was the differentiating factor. As somebody who leans the Commanders, and I do think it is going to be the public side, as you mentioned, that Commanders team, I threw a few shekels on the money line. Of course, I did, VR. Did I really expect them to win outright? No, I came right here on this program and said, I don't blame you if you tease the Lions. I understand it's non-traditional. The books are protecting themselves. But things like that are Jake Elliott, right? So Dan Alexander, our producer, and I talked about it on last call. Guys like him that have been inconsistent all season long is a little bit more than a luck factor. So would you consider certain things like that where he may miss a field goal late, he may miss a PAT or 2, so they end up going for 2? Do you break those types of things down into your handicap whatsoever?
Absolutely, because you have to differentiate between, like you said, is it actually luck or is that just simply probability? Because it's probable that he's not a perfect kicker. He's not that guy you want in that clutch situation. So that's where with the luck factor, especially when it comes to the NFL, where they're single games. That's the key there. They're single games. So there's a lot of randomness involved. Sure, if someone gets really lucky, they will regress to the mean. Your luck can't stay forever. But what does that mean? And more importantly, what is the long term? Because in the short term, you could continue to outperform the market. You could continue to defy probability. And that's what I think most are thinking Washington's doing. But are they really doing that? Or are they just beating these teams and creating their own luck? Because when you're +5 in turnovers, you have to be a part of that. Like, they didn't just give you the ball. They didn't just drop the ball on purpose. They didn't just throw it to the other team on purpose. You are creating those turnovers. You're creating those opportunities. So I do think we kind of flip the narrative to what supports our bet or what supports our losing or winning bet. And I think I'm seeing a lot of that with the Washington side, because I know I touched as much as I can that the wise guy teaser last week was Detroit, Kansas City. It wasn't just the recreational bettors. It was the betting syndicates taking advantage of the Wong teaser. And they got beat. There was also money line parlays. They got beat. And I think everyone has that little ego and everyone has that little bad beat that they kind of still sticks in their tummy. And these guys are human like all of us. And it's almost, I think, a revenge bet against Washington as much as it is like in Philadelphia. I think anyone that did bet Philly was getting out ahead of the number. Good for you. You did a good job. But I think now we got to handicap it from that -6.5. Art says he don't expect the 7. We'll see. That may appear, at least at some of the square books, especially if this Philadelphia money continues to come in. So a long way of saying, can you conclude they're lucky? Maybe. But if they keep creating this luck for themselves, it doesn't mean it's going to go away.
All right. Art DiCesare is going to be joining us to reiterate some of the stuff that he also said on Wager Talk today. So we will, cross-reference what VR is saying with that as well. VR is somebody who suffers from chief derangement syndrome. Yes, that is what one of my my guy friends told me is my problem, because I did bet Buffalo in teasers. As soon as it came out, I said Ohio State, Buffalo. And I banged that around for a few, and I left a couple open Buffaloes in case it moved out of that range. I don't really think I have Chiefs derangement syndrome. I just think that there is always a premium to pay for this team, right? So last week, I didn't really like the Texans. I had to pick one of the sides in my pools. Luckily for me, I either had 7.5, 8, or 8.5. Because if I had 9.5, I think I would have blown an absolute utter gasket. Chiefs, once again, don't cover the closing number, but win the game. Is that what was going to happen here? Is this going to be like a 21-20 final? Chiefs are somehow going to pull out the win and beat Buffalo. Josh Allen, up until last weekend, was 0-3 as an underdog in the playoffs. I was holding a Ravens ticket. I know you were as well. The 3 turnovers, too much to overcome there, whether it was Lamar, whether it was Mark Andrews, dropping that 2-point conversion. I think there was a lot of blame to go around. I think the Ravens really beat themselves. But I still do have the Bills as a better team over the Chiefs. I made the Ravens 1, Bills 1B, Lions, then I made the Chiefs. So I do have some questions about this game. Was I too quick to jump on the Bills? We're going to see a ton of Chiefs money coming in, or are they just not trusting this team still?
No, I don't think you're going to see a ton of money on the Bills, Kel. And I don't think it's going to 3. There's no way, especially because of the way Buffalo got the job done in history where, they choke in that spot. They outplayed. It seemed like they got outplayed, at least according to the box score, but they got the win. That's the bottom line. And Buffalo's done that all year. They are number 1 in the NFL in turnover ratio. They are plus 24. Now, you could chalk a lot of that up to luck, because plus 10 of that is on interceptions. Plus 14 of that is on the fumble side. Listen, when the ball hits the ground, it's 50-50 who's going to pick it up. But this team managed to pick it up a lot more than their opposition. And yet when they dropped the ball, only 2 times did the opposition recover. So again, is that luck? Or is Buffalo just playing so much better that the luck factor keeps falling their way? Because again, that's when you look at this matchup, at least on paper, it looks like Kansas City is the better team, meaning offensively, defensively, their quarterback rating of the other team, they allow less. The defense for Buffalo allows a 93.3. The Chiefs allow 90.6. You look at the against the run. Buffalo allows 4.5 yards per rush. They allow 4.1. Even look at special teams, kicking, punting, returning. All those favor the Kansas City side. But they haven't been able to win by margin at all this year. That's what makes it scary. But they don't have to win by margin here. They simply have to win this football game against Buffalo. That's why I think you'll see more balanced action, Kel. I think a lot of the trend players are like, listen, KC, nobody's ever repeated. They probably won't get the Super, won't get that opportunity. And those that had the Buffalo side over Baltimore, there was a lot of one-sided action late. I think they're happy and they're going to roll that over into the Kansas City game. I think you're going to see good balanced action here. And even from the sharp bettors, because they laid the pick, but I've been seeing some take back on the Buffalo side. And I heard a lot of guys I respect that are on the Buffalo side. And more importantly, I know a lot of guys I respect who have Buffalo on a teaser from the Ohio State side on Monday night, myself included. Again, I don't tease college football, but I don't say always or never. There's always a spot where you could break your rules if it's beneficial. And I did that, and it worked out for me. So I find myself in a good position as far as Buffalo and Kansas City. No one's here to hear about my bets. I will tell you this. It's another game that I lean under. I lean under once again, and here's why. This will be the third time these two teams met over the last 12 months. Both of those games went over. Yet, if you look at the average closing line, it was 46.5. They scored 51 points in both of those games. So it did go over by less than a touchdown. The adjustment, I don't think is warranted. Again, I don't think just because of those two games that the adjustment even up is warranted. I think in a playoff game, if anything, you're going to bring the total down a little bit. And that didn't happen because we have a little bit recency bias surrounding this game. Just like the Philadelphia game, I think no one wants to make the mistake. Like if you're Washington, the last thing you want to do is fall behind in Philadelphia. It's not going to go good for a rookie quarterback, first-year head coach that most believe shouldn't even be here. And I think Kansas City Buffalo is the same way. I don't think Buffalo wants to fall behind due to this Kansas City team who has the history of getting the job done and getting to the Super Bowl. I don't think it's going to be as wide open as a game as some expect. I think you're going to see a lot more slower pace. Let's not make mistakes. Let's put ourselves in a position to win with 5 minutes left. From both of these teams, I think that's what you're going to see. Because, again, not to go long, but Kansas City got a lot of players back on offense and did not use them. They didn't do much for them in that playoff game. Again, we have a sample size of one, so you can't really take too much out of it. But still, they're winning with defense. And what got you here, I don't think they're going to change. So I think Kansas City will slow the pace down, and they don't want to get in a shootout with Buffalo because that has not worked for them this year, which is evident by them not being able to win by margin. And I think Buffalo on the road doesn't want to fall behind to a Chiefs team that knows how to get to the Super Bowl. So I think under in both these games is where the value is. And if it goes 2-0 over, obviously I look like the fool. But I do think we're going to see lower scoring games in both. I'm looking to see where this total goes. I haven't bet it yet, but I like the under in both these games.
He is a great gambler. As I mentioned, you can check him out every single Saturday and Sunday on Wager Talk's Last Call with Me. And of course, premium subscribers get free access to his Steam room, wt.buzz / what is it, VR? I keep wanting to say / VR, but is it GG?
I'm not even sure. Can I just go to Greek_gambler? Or VR?
It is VR,
Thank God we have a producer in the booth who's actually paying attention.
Well,
He's actually usually they'd be scrolling
because that's the reality. I have to remember all these short links, and I'm like, I call him VR. Does everybody else? Nobody else calls him VR. Johnny calls you Ace. You call yourself the Greek Gambler / VR. Do not miss out on any of his premium plays. He has been absolutely red hot, and that is why he joins us every single weekend on Last Call. Next up, guess who's back? I love it. Art DiCesare, WestGate Superbook. Art, I'm glad you are feeling better enough to grace us with your presence. If you guys missed Last Call on Saturday, Art sent me a very extensive text message that we read off and pushed me 2 extra winners. I'm very glad. Faded that lovely Miami of Florida team and faded Kentucky. So shout out to Art, always bringing us great stuff. And if I would have thought ahead, I'd asked him to bring some college basketball for today. That being said, Art is the best. He gives us a look behind the counter. So, Art, let's get into some of these games. Well, there's only 2 of them this weekend, but most importantly, I want to talk some liability stuff, right? Obviously, each book has different liability on the Super Bowl, but over at the WestGate Superbook, you guys are cheering against the Kansas City Chiefs.
That's for sure, Kelly. We're definitely rooting against the Chiefs. We're rooting against the Eagles a little bit. Bills is our best outcome out of the 4. If Buffalo could go on and win the Super Bowl, it would be our best look in the future book. Washington not as bad, not that bad. Be right behind Buffalo, but Buffalo number one for us right now that we want to see win the Super Bowl. Number one we want to avoid is Kansas City.
I kind of figured that. And I kind of would love to not see Kansas City in the Super Bowl myself. But again, I just want to see some new blood. Bills commies would be awesome. Let's talk a few more angles for the Super Bowl. John and I discussed it on Kelly and Murray, but I want to give like a big, shout out to the WestGate. I know you're always working, but as somebody who's always a patron during the Super Bowl, I've done it all. I've been in the theater, I've been in the sports book, I've been in the convention center, and they all provide a different experience for the Super Bowl. But kind of talk about what Super Bowl week is like, not only in Vegas, but specifically at the WestGate Superbook.
Yeah, I mean, Kelly, listen, I know a lot of places offer unique experiences, but I think ours is singular. I mean, you have the thrill and the energy of being in the sports book with just the normal crowd that you're always going to have, but then you have a lot of other things, like you mentioned, the convention center, the theater. If you want to be someone who wants to rent a pod or rent the clubhouse, I know you guys were in the clubhouse last year. It's just such a fun atmosphere, fun event, lot going on. So I think we do it as good as anyone or even better. I know I'm a little biased. And listen, I've worked for other sports books, and it hasn't been as good as it is at the WestGate.
I get accused of smoking cigarettes all the time because I have this like awful, deep, raspy voice. And in fact, I am so anti-cigarette smoke. And I know that I say the gluten-free pizza is the number one thing I love about the WestGate Superbook, but it's actually the fact that it's smoke-free. If you guys are like me, you want to have, a really fun environment without the smell. I love it over there. It's one of my favorites. All right, before we get into these two games, let's talk about some what-if scenarios. I love that you guys do look-ahead lines there at the WestGate Superbook. Last week, we saw Bills would be 1.5-point favorites to the Chiefs at a couple of sports books, but you guys marched them out as 1.5-point underdogs. Let's talk about some interesting scenarios. Bills, Eagles, Bills, Commies, Chiefs, Eagles, Commanders, Chiefs.
Well, yeah, we try to put out these potential lines if we can, and sure, maybe you see the Bills that were 1-point favorites in a lot of places at Kansas City. I mean, we opened Buffalo 1, so it wasn't like it was that crazy. But when you look at basically Bills, Eagles, Chiefs, Eagles, that's going to be right around 1, 1.5, 2 in that range. Obviously, if Washington gets into the game, you start to be more in the range of where we are with this Eagle game, where you're going to talk anywhere of a low 4.5, maybe a high of 6.5. If Washington gets into the game, the total really goes up. The total is going to be in the 50s if Washington's in the game. So there's obviously different scenarios there. And as always, you can bet the potentials. And if the matchup doesn't happen, you obviously get your money back. The matchup has to happen for you to have action. So always remember that.
Absolutely. Let's talk about some of that set action. Sharp action this week. Interesting bets. I know it is Wednesday, so the public has yet to really start to get involved. But what have you seen so far behind the counter?
Yeah, it's a great call, Kelly. You got to keep that in mind. Public really hasn't gotten involved yet, but let's look at the Washington-Philadelphia game. We opened 5.5, 48, and we've seen a steady stream of Philly money come in. Got us to 6. Now we're at 6.5. Total's gone down 0.5 point. That was just us moving with the market. We didn't want to be the only 48 out there, so we got to 47. Obviously, Philly's going to be very popular. Starting teasers. They're going to be the team that everyone teases to pick, and then they'll figure out which side they like in the AFC Championship game. When people do come in and bet Washington, it's going to be kind of like it was last week with some of the bigger spreads. They might take a chance with Washington on the money line. We haven't seen that yet, but sometimes that happens because the money lines are a little bit inflated. When we talk Bills-Chiefs, this is a game we opened 1.5, also 48. We're now Kansas City 2. And this to me has the feel of the Baltimore-Buffalo game where maybe you don't see a lot of spread action on the game, where I do think Buffalo will get teased up. I think you'll see the 7.5s and 8s on Buffalo and teasers. But I think this is going to be more of who you like, you take the money line. Whether you lay 130 with Kansas City or you take plus 110 with Buffalo, I think you're going to see that, and you see that a lot more when these spreads are tight. Total has also gone down to 47.5. Once again, just moving with the market on that. I know there were some 47s out there as well. I think we got there for a little bit, but then bounced back up to 47.5. So both of those totals have moved, but it's just been market stuff.
You're the best. At Art Dice 21 over there on X. You can also catch him on Wager Talk today. And of course, Saturdays, Wager Talk Last Call. We're going to be taking it through college basketball season and may have a special guest hosting for baseball season, but Art is going to be joining us there as well. Maybe some John Murray there on Sundays. As always, make sure you guys head over to the WestGate Superbook anytime you guys are in Las Vegas. They're booking the action game day at reduced juice, so always save yourself a couple of bucks. All right, I got my odds logic screen open because this one is on the move. Washington opened as a 5-point underdog at Philadelphia, and that was a blip on the radar. Immediately went to 5.5. Then we started seeing 6 popping up. Today, the WestGate Superbook is the lone 6 at 2:22 p.m. Eastern, 6.5, excuse me. And I found that very interesting and not conducive here, guys. I like Washington in this spot. I think they're really fun. Scrappy underdog team. I said it last week on the show. I said, I like Washington. Go ahead. Tease the Lions. It looks so easy to do so. Washington had a lot of things go their way in that game. I was very happy I sprinkled on the money line, but boy, oh boy, beating the Lions. Now going on the road to Philly in the cold, hostile environment. Teddy Covers, you went last during the AFC preview, so you get to go first this time. Talk to me about this one. I mean, I have just been super impressed with Washington for a better part of the season. Jaden Daniels, Rookie of the Year. What else do we have to break down in this one?
So certainly we have a pretty interesting series history between these two teams, being that the last time they played, Washington turned the ball over 5 times and still won the ball game. This is a Washington team that has 1 punt in their first 2 postseason games this year. And that being said, and of course, Philly's got injury issues. All right. Jalen Hurts, who, what did he take? 7 sacks last week, 8 sacks last week. We're not used to seeing that. He injured his knee. He's not listed on the injury report, but I'm not convinced his knee's at 100%. Obviously, the rookie cornerback, Quinyon Mitchell, got hurt last week, and Nakobe Dean on the defensive side of the football. These are impact injuries for the Philadelphia Eagles. That being said, all right, Philly's 16-3. They have a 1-point loss to Atlanta week 2. They had a bad loss in week 4, and then the Commanders lost week 16, a game where Jalen Hurts didn't even play. It was Kenny Pickett behind center after Hurts went 1 of 4 and got hurt in the first quarter. Washington's played as well as they could play. Obviously, you talked about all the turnovers last week, +5 turnover edge. You're supposed to win that game. You're supposed to win it by margin. But much like when we talk about Buffalo and Kansas City, we're talking about the history. History matters here. And this is where teams like Washington go to lose. I mean, that's been the case in the NFL. We can go back. I can list, when you start throwing out examples, the upstart teams get bounced when they reach the conference championship game. Philly's been the class all season. And for as good as Washington has been, this is a step up for them. And they're coming off 2 pretty significant victories. Now, I worry a lot about the Eagles laying the points in this. I worry about the fatigue factor. All right. Last week's game in the snow took a, took a fun, what's the appropriate expression here? It took a lot out of both teams. All right. And obviously Philadelphia is the one that's playing this week. But we saw it by the second half of that game, defensively, offensively, everyone was gassed. And I think there may be some carryover effect for that. And let's not forget, Philadelphia played on Sunday as opposed to Washington, who gets the extra day's worth of rest here. So there's cases to be made for the Commanders in this game. I just think that when all's said and done, this time of the year, I want the class, not the upstart. I'm looking at Philly. But the stronger play here might well be on the total. But that one, sorry guys, it's for the clients.
Ooh, I like that, Teddy. Play on the total for the clients. Joe Raineri, you're usually our totals guy. We're both in agreement on the Bills. Talk to me about this Commanders-Eagles matchup. I feel like I'm kind of on an island here, being the one who likes the scrappy underdog with lots to play for. This Eagles team, I'm just not sure I really believe that they are well-rounded enough. I mean, there was a lot of kicking for losers moments. We know Hurts has been hurt, although he had a nice 50-yard touchdown run there against the Rams. Looked pretty healthy then. Obviously, some offensive line woes and so forth. Talk to me about this Eagles team and whether they're not, well, whether you should be laying it with them. I mean, starting to get up here in the 6.5. I don't think we see a 7, but you never know.
It's interesting, Cal, because this is, we talked earlier about Buffalo and Kansas City and how this is a rivalry that we have seen when it comes to the playoffs a lot. It's interesting that divisional rematches this late in the playoffs, we've only had 4 in the last 2 decades where we've had teams playing for a third time this late in the season. The favorite, 4-0 straight up, 3-1 against the numbers. The games are usually really, really close here. But to me, this comes down to Jaden Daniels because he has been unbelievable in the postseason from the standpoint of he's only been sacked once, and he hasn't turned the ball over at all. And we know that if that is going to be the case, well, with the amount of weapons and his ability to be able to get outside the pocket, you got to worry about not only the wide receivers that have been playing out of their mind. McLaurin is absolutely nuts. Brown, now the tight end, has been his go-to guy because now defenses don't know who to cover here. And he has been the guy rushing the ball. Robinson has been nowhere to be found. This is all about Jaden Daniels and the Philadelphia Eagles' ability to make him one-dimensional. If they can do that, they will win this game. They will win it rather easily. If they can't get off the field, this defense, listen, they turned him over 5 times in that game, got about week 16. They still figured out a way to lose. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't know what Jalen Hurts' situation is going to be. If he lacks mobility, that's a big part of the offense for Philadelphia that could go bye-bye there, and all of a sudden they become extremely one-dimensional. So this is a little tougher game simply because I don't know what we're going to get from Jalen Hurts. And then and I'm sure Marco's breaking out in hives thinking about Mr. Pickett under center again and how he wishes he was still the quarterback for his Pittsburgh Steelers. But sorry, Marco, he's not. He might actually have a big role in helping the Eagles get past Washington and head to the Super Bowl if that's the case. The bottom line to me here, Cal, is, listen, Dan Quinn defensively has been great. I think if you are backing Philadelphia and think Philadelphia is the right side here, then you got to believe that defense is going to make Jaden Daniels extremely one-dimensional, and they're going to be playing from behind the entire time. And if that's the case, I don't see how we're getting over 47.5 points in this game. If you think Washington's got a legit shot at outright doing and winning this game and doing the unthinkable with a rookie quarterback, then they better be able to score some points on this Philadelphia defense. If they do, you probably lean the over. To me, this is all about the under, Cal, and I think it's about the under in the first half. And I think we're going to learn a lot about these two teams offensively and the defenses early on. So I don't mind a full game under. I don't mind the first half under. I don't see this game getting closer to 50. I think this game is closer to 40 than it is anything else. And Philadelphia, in all likelihood, might be that other half of the teaser we talked about with Buffalo.
I was waiting for you to get there and to say, just take them down to a pick 'em. Marco D'Angelo, last but not least, anything that Teddy or Joe missed that you think is noteworthy here in the NFC Championship game?
Well, Kelly, the first thing I think that is noteworthy is we want to tell the listeners about the special we got going at Wager Talk this week. Any capper, you can get 7-day all-access package for just $77. Now, that's a special that I had been running the last couple of weeks, and you guys have responded to that so well that Mr. Johnny Detroit decided to do it site-wide this week, and you can pick up your favorite capper for $77. And I'll throw my hat in the ring there. If you want to jump on me, good time to do it, because we're 48-26 over the last 33 days for a profit of over $4,400. So check us out. For this game, Kelly, here's the way I'm looking at it. You've got Washington. They've won 7 in a row, and they're coming off just destroying the number 1 seed Detroit Lions. So right now, I think they're everybody's darling. Philadelphia won. They had the lead in the game. It looked like it was going to be a comfortable win. And then all of a sudden, if you had Philadelphia, you were sweating bullets. Yes, I'm talking to you, Dan, late in that game last week when the Rams made, the furious comeback. Give them credit for that. But let's go back to Washington and look at the reality. I think Detroit came in there, and I know this is going to sound silly, and I'm going to get crucified in the comments section, which I love, because you know what? When you crucify us, you help the algorithm. So go ahead and yell at me. Tell me why I'm wrong in thinking this way. But I think Detroit winning the final game of the regular season against Minnesota in the fashion that they did to lock up the number 1 seed, they came in here fat and sassy, thinking they just had to show up and they were going to be able to win. Remember, we're talking about a Detroit Lions team that was in uncharted water. They won their first playoff game in how long last season? Now they're coming in with a bye week in the number 1 seed. Maybe they didn't really know how to handle that. I know Dan Campbell's never been in that situation. So let's mark that down for next year for the Lions, that they might have learned a valuable life lesson. Now, speaking of the life lessons, we've seen, and Teddy alluded to it, these teams that you want to talk about being, upstarts and come from nowhere, that, this is where they usually reality sets in. It's because they're not going to be taken for granted. And a team that's, overachieved means they're playing on the road again. This is going to be 3 straight playoff games on the road, 4 straight road games for Washington. They didn't have a bye, and they're going from playing in perfect conditions in Detroit to be playing in who knows what the weather's going to be in Philadelphia come Saturday or Sunday. I know right now, it's colder than hell all over the place in Pennsylvania. So it's not going to be perfect conditions for Washington. I still can't get past the fact that even though everybody's going to look and say, Washington put up 45 points on Detroit. Yes, they did. A lot of that was aided by the 5 turnovers. I can't get past the fact they gave up 31 points, and Detroit gave away 5 possessions. How many points does Detroit get if they don't throw away all those possessions with the turnovers? This is a game where I think it's finally going to come down to they're playing a division rival. They know one another. Philadelphia's had 2 games where they won but really didn't look super impressive. But here's the thing. Does Washington stop the running game? And nobody runs the football better than Barkley. It would be better if Hurts was 100% healthy, because then you got to worry not only about Barkley, you got to worry about Hurts running the football, and then you also got to worry about the passing game. If he's healthy, watch the injury reports, find out what's going on from the beat writers during the week in practice. If he's a full go and can run everything in the offense, I think Philadelphia wins this game. 12 of their last 14 opponents, they've held to 20 points or less. One of the 2 that they didn't do it to, yes, was Washington in that turnover-filled game. But if you remember that game, right here on Bet On It, I gave out Washington against Philadelphia. And my reason for that game was, even though that was a division game, it was a sandwich spot for Philadelphia. They were coming off playing the Steelers, which at the time, the Steelers were on their winning streak. That was a big game. And then they had Dallas the following week. And I know Washington was the better team this year, and they were a division rival. But to me, you had Dallas on deck. It's always a bigger game just because of the history with Dallas. I think Philly gets the job done. I think Philly goes to the Super Bowl. I think there's 2 ways to look at it. Joe had one of them. Under in the first half. They're going to play field position and not wanting to make the first mistake. And we'll keep things simple for Daniels. 2, this is his first conference championship game as a rookie. I think they play tight in the first half. I would lean to the under, but full game. And yeah, look at those teasers. I got to be looking at the Philadelphia side. I think this is their game to win, and they get back to the Super Bowl.
I'm just curious as to who do we think, Marco, has the coaching edge here? If it comes down to the fourth quarter, it's a 4th and 3, 4th and 4. We've seen Dan Quinn playing with house money a lot. And it's not like Sirianni's got this great January track record in the playoffs. So who do we trust here on the sidelines to make the right calls and push the right buttons?
Well, the best way that I can answer that question for you, Joe, is I'll give you, an analogy. Would you rather be punched in the face or kicked in the nuts? Because that's basically what your two choices are here with the coaches.
Let's go. Teddy?
Teddy, tell me you have a logical answer here, please.
So
I don't.
There's all
because
the criticism of Nick Sirianni.
Right.
For all the love for Dan Quinn, I ain't getting 28-3 out of my mind ever. Okay? Ever. All right? So Dan Quinn's got a little something to prove to me before I'm going to anoint him as the coach ahead of Nick Sirianni.
So true.
I still think it's a coin toss between the two of them. I don't trust either as far as that goes. I'm totally honest.
Teddy has PTSD from a Super Bowl 10 years ago. So here we are. I mean,
Marco's like, do you want the used car with 3 wheels or 2 wheels? Which one do you want?
There aren't many games in my life that I remember that I'm like, this game is completely over. Ha ha, we won. I'm like, they can't possibly cut. They need 2 touchdowns and 2-point conversions. And look, we're still in field goal. We're in field goal range already. I'm like, there's no possible way New England can win this game and cover. And of course, then not only they get the 2 touchdowns, 2-point conversions, and they win the toss in overtime, and we all know what happens. But I'm not that, I'm like, this game is over. And I've been doing this a long time. I don't say that unless the game's freaking over. And that's one that wasn't. I will always have PTSD off that win. That was going to be a huge day for me, and it ended up not being so much.
That's a good thing they got Kellen Moore, Kelly. That's all I'm going to say. I mean, nothing screams confidence like, oh, well, maybe not.
I had Atlanta minus 14.5. I had Atlanta minus 7.5. I think I had a minus 21.5 in that game. I was looking at a huge payday. Sorry,
Ouch.
I'm over it now. Clearly.
are you? I mean, I feel like we just need to have like bet on it therapy sessions, like where we just sit around and we just hit the record button. We just let our audience listen to us bitch about our bad beats. They're either going to love it or hate it.
Can I bitch on one? Mine is the Super Bowl. I was with you. I had Atlanta in that one. But to me, I'll still never forget the Seattle-New England one when I'm at the 2-yard line. And I got Marshawn Lynch in the backfield to get us the game-winning touchdown. I'm sorry. That's the one that sticks out to me. Yes, the Atlanta was a huge meltdown, but mine that sticks in my craw is Seattle against New England.
Oh, boy.
So the difference for me for those two, Marco, I was on both of those with you. The Atlanta one, I was at a friend's house, relaxing, having fun. We just won. The Seattle one, I was at the WestGate on camera, live betting Seattle right before the last drive. And then, bottom line, Kelly, to just put a wrap on it, there's no huge coaching edge in either game. There's not a game where I'm sitting there going, oh, McDermott's an idiot and Reed's a genius, or Sirianni's an idiot, Quinn's a genius. Everybody's an idiot. Everybody's a genius until proven otherwise. And I rate the two coaching matchups as neutral.
It's kind of like the chat room, Kelly, that we have here. See, everyone's a genius after the game's over in the chat room. It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Nobody knows. I mean, it's unreal how amazing the people are in the chat room once the game is over and the results are in. Unreal.
Yeah, I mean, why do you think we go so viral on TikTok? Like the games where I say the most perfect outcome, everybody says nothing. I get no likes. The one game here or there that I'm dead wrong on goes viral, 120,000 likes, and it's like they just eviscerate me in the comments, and I'm like, it's because it's a bunch of 12-year-olds. It's a bunch of kids watching TikTok that know nothing except the fact that I was wrong.
That's it.
Okay.
It's all that matters.
On that note, we've got more show to get to, guys. And All right, Andy. It is championship weekend. The prop market is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, except it's not, because every single time I open up the apps, there's new names and new faces. The bookmakers are really starting to expand, and I think that's really awesome, especially for a guy like you that likes to dig deep. How deep have you dug for this week's prop bet of the week?
This one really jumped off the page for me. I'm going to go to Dallas Goedert and over 38 and a half receiving yards. He was banged up for a while, missed some time. Since he's come back in his last 3 games, Kelly, 56, 47, and 55. So he's not only just barely going over this, he's really going over this total. And I know what the narrative is about the Eagles passing attack, but listen, they're winning. I'm not really sure what the problem is here. And Jalen Hurts doesn't need to throw for 300 yards for the Eagles to win. I would argue if he does throw for 300 yards, something's probably gone wrong. But Dallas Goedert has just been steady Eddie. He's gone over his longest reception in 4 straight games, so he's getting these big chunks of yards. And Washington, last time Goddard played was on the 14th of November. He had a 32-yard catch just in that game, and he had 61 yards total. This is a Washington team that gives up 45.7 yards per game. Goddard's their main tight end talent, and I think he's going to fly over this 38.5. I like this setup for him and Jalen Hurts a lot, so give me Dallas Goedert as this week's best bet. Don't forget, take 2 of these. It'll cure not all of your ills, but a couple of them. Call me in the morning.
There we go. At Bump Sports on X. At Andy Langbets on TikTok. He's back. You guys don't have to go to Blue Sky. Andy, we'll see you for the Super Bowl. Ralph Michaels joins us for some TNA Championship Weekend. Ralph, I know that there's usually not a lot of data, right? 4-team sample sizes. It gets a little convoluted, but you have looked really hard through your database and you found us some nice angles. Let's have them.
Well, Kelly, there's no wow numbers, but again, even if the numbers aren't good, it's you should be informed at what they are. But I will say this. You have to remember that the playoffs have changed significantly in 2 different times over the last 5 years. Remember, prior to 2020, 2 teams had buys. So you had the number 1 seed and the number 2 seed getting buys. Since that time, only the number 1 seed has buys. And let's remember, we went to a 17-game schedule, so we really have no long-term data to see how that affects teams. So let me just throw out some numbers. Again, they're not wow numbers, but at least you can understand what has happened in the AFC and NFC championships since 2010 and 2015. Since 2010, the home team is 19-9 straight up, 16-5 since 2013. Against the spread, 14-14. The over-under, 13-14-1, so 1 game over 500. But in the last 3 years, the over-under is 1-5 in championship week, so 5 unders and 1 over. How have the number 1 seeds done? Since 2015, the number 1 seed is 10-4 straight up, 8-6 against the spread, and 8-6 over-under. If we have a 1 versus a 2 seed, like KC and Buffalo, again, this is one of those situations where it's changed, because remember, the 2 seed used to have a bye, but the 1 seed is still 3-0 against the spread since 2019, and 6-2 straight up in ATS, going all the way back since 2015. That is the number 1 against the number 2 seed. The number 1 seed has done very well. How about teams like like Washington, that are off back-to-back road wins? Well, those teams have gone 2-7 straight up and 3-6 against the spread. But while that 3-6 record is a negative, the last 2 times it's happened, teams that won back-to-back games and now playing in this round are actually 2-0. They won in 2020 and 2021. Here's one to circle, Kelly, for next week if Washington wins. Since 2010, a Super Bowl team that played at least their last 2 games on the road have gone 8-0 against the spread. Obviously, Washington's the only team that can apply to. I know Dan's listening, giving me the finger right now, as he's going to enjoy his Philadelphia Eagles next Sunday, but that's only if Washington wins. Just a quick look ahead. In the AFC and NFC championships, totals over 51 have gone 6-2 to the over. We don't have any of those. Totals of under 51, 51 or less. 0-4 over under the last 3 years, so 4 unders and 0 overs, and 7, 10, and 1 over under since 2010. And teams with more rest, both the Chiefs and the Commanders have more rest this week. Those teams, 10 and 6 ATS the last 8 years. And I know VR talks about the playoffs and the straight up winner and how they cover. Well, I can say this, the last 12 years, the straight up winner has gone 20-4. The only 4 teams that won the game and failed to cover, a 7.5 point favorite last year, a 7.5 point favorite in 2017, an 8 point favorite in 2014. So only one team that was favored as a dog of was a favorite of a touchdown or less that won the game and failed to cover was the 2021 LA Rams against the 49ers. They won by 3, laying 3.5. So again, no wow numbers, but just to give you a quick overview of what the championship series have done the past few seasons.
Thank you to Ralph Michaels, as always, at Cal Sports LV, WT.buzz/RM. Make sure you guys check out his wagertalk.com page. Outside of his premium plays, he does a ton of free stuff, including lots of great newsletters as well. If you guys missed some of those playoff tidbits, you really missed out. All right, guys, we will be back for the Super Bowl, of course. Marco and Teddy both have premium plays up for the AFC and NFC championship games over there on their page. And give a shout out to all of you guys for hanging out with us here all football season long. Also, thank you to VR, the Greek gambler, as you guys know him, Andy Lang, the proptologist, Art DiCesare, for always giving us that look behind the counter there at the WestGate Superbook. And of course, Ralph coming in saying he didn't have anything that was that spicy and dropping in a nice Commanders TNA that I can't wait to use the rest of the week on the shows. Again, thank you to all of you guys. Best of luck this week. We'll see you for the Super Bowl.